My method is simple. Any member of your family or overseer can use it. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. Take this simple list of differences and think about them. On top of my list is age, but that's only because it begins with an A. The second is color or shade. Whether the slaves live in a valley or on a hill, east, west, north, or south. They have fine hair, coarse hair, tall or short. I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. The black slaves, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds, maybe thousands of years to come. That was an excerpt from the Willie Lynch speech. That was an excerpt from the Willie Lynch letter, a speech given by a white slave master to a group of other slave masters. The goal of that speech was to tell other slave masters how to control their slaves and put them in their place for years to come. Welcome, Faith and Family Church, and welcome to the Men's Forum on Colorism in the Black Community. I am Dr. Brandon J. Williams, and I'm your moderator for this evening. Here at Faith and Family Church, our theme for this month is love. The theme for this week in particular is love the skin that you're in. I have the rest of my panel introduce themselves at this time before we get into this great conversation.
Cool. My name is Richard Duncan, pastor here at Faith and Family Church and a youth advocate.
My name is Craig Jones, local entrepreneur.
I'm TJ Gwynn, information security.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us. Before I get to the questions, I want to give some definitions on colorism. Colorism is also known as skin tone bias, and it's also known as color complex. It's defined as prejudice and discrimination towards people based on skin color and when one skin tone is preferred over another. This term was first coined by Alice Walker in 1982. Guys, if you don't mind, before we get into the questions, I'd like to go over a history of colorism. As we talked about with the Willie Lynch letter, colorism stemmed from slavery, right? During slavery, we had the separation of the blacks based on color, the slaves based on color. We had the light-skinned slaves were confined to the house and doing housework, doing some of the more mundane activities. We had some of the darker slaves that were in the fields doing some of the more strenuous work. And this led to the slave owners, of course, raping those slaves, the lighter-skinned slaves that were in the household, and that led to the development of mulatto children. Those light-skinned slaves were more likely to learn to read, they were more likely to learn to write, and they were more likely to earn their freedom than some of their darker-skinned counterparts. In the 60s and 70s, we started to see the development of the paper bag test. So if an individual was the same shade as a paper bag, a brown paper bag or lighter, they were afforded more opportunities. They were allowed to have more access to jobs than individuals who were darker than this paper bag. In the 60s and, did I say that was in the 60s and 70s? Okay, let me say that again. This is in the 19th and 20th century.
Yeah, you said 60s and 70s for that.
All right, sorry, can I do that again? Yeah. In the 19th and 20th century, we saw the development of the paper bag test. So if an individual was this shade or lighter, they were afforded more opportunities. They were afforded more opportunities to jobs and to enter spaces where blacks were congregating. If you were darker than this piece of paper, you weren't allowed access, and you weren't allowed access to those jobs. In the 60s and 70s, though, we saw a Renaissance movement. We saw a shift, whereas Black Power became a model for everybody, for the Black movement, for Black Americans. And I think the dark-skinned individuals finally thought that they was going to get their opportunity to shine and to really appreciate the skin that they were in. However, studies have shown that there's been a shift back. And so light-skinned individuals have been recent studies have shown that there's been a shift backwards. Light-skinned women studies have shown that white-skinned women have been, start over.
Take your time, take your time.
All right. However, guys, recent studies have shown that there has been a shift backwards. So light-skinned women have been sentenced at better sentences, 12%. I gotta do that over, sorry. All right, recent studies, I just added this part in. All right, recent studies have shown that there has been a shift backwards, guys, unfortunately. Light-skinned women were sentenced to approximately 12% less time behind bars than their darker-skinned counterparts. And a 2006 study done by the University of Georgia found that employers were more readily able to, a light-skinned, a 2006 University of Georgia study showed that employers prefer light-skinned Black Americans opposed to darker-skinned Black Americans, no matter what their qualifications were. So guys, that brings me to my first question. Do you all think that colorism still plays a part in the Black community today?
Go for it, Craig.
I think on the surface, it's not as noticeable. I think when you break people into private groups and you really have a conversation about it, there's instances, but I think that like all things, not a lot of things in the Black community, we don't really show how we feel about certain things. There can be aspects of mental health and whatnot, because unfortunately, I think in the Black community, when people talk about their feelings a lot, or people might say too much, others may see it as a sign of a weakness, or when you're cracking jokes and things like that, it's natural to just let it go, when it can actually immediately in years to come that you keep suppressing those feelings. So I don't think it's as evident as it once was, because the paper bag test was right in your face. You knew when you walked to that door, if you didn't meet the qualifications, you weren't going in and out. But today, whether it can be financial, a home loan, or approval, you walk into a bank and somebody may look you up and down right then and there. You might not know, but I think it does play a part in today's society, unfortunately.
To go off the job aspect of it, just looking at someone's resume, for the most part, you would be able to know if that person is Black. When you see that person, when that person actually comes in to do the interview, when they're like light skin or dark skin, you have a good idea if they're going to get the job or not. If the person is like really tall and dark skin, you're probably looking at them like, I don't know. If the person is like overweight and like dark skin, they probably have that same look and demeanor about them. I mean, I just wanted to add that in there when you talk about black people like getting jobs and things of that nature.
Yeah, going back to the question, do we think that colorism divides the black American community today? I definitely would say yes. As Craig said, it may not be as evident, but it may be evident to some. Me and my family were having a conversation just the other night, and a question that arose was, how many dark-skinned women do you see as love interest in television or in movies compared to your light-skinned women? And light-skinned women, I mean, people were rolling down. They got the Halle Berry, you got all these people, like you got all these different people. But when it came to dark-skinned women, it was maybe Gabrielle Union, and then maybe Gabrielle Union. And so it kind of paused, right? And so I think we're divided. It divides us subconsciously. You know, sometimes we don't even think about it, but it's what we see. It's what our children see. I definitely think it's still divided today. I think society divides us a lot.
Oh, definitely.
I think our own people, we divide us a lot. And it goes back to, though, what you were just saying earlier, though, it goes back to we were divided because they divided us. They forced us to division. They want us to fight amongst ourselves. They want us to keep each other down. So it still goes back to the slavery days.
And that's like it's the things that we're putting in ourselves, like the TV shows we watch, the music we listen to. Like there's music videos that we may watch. I mean, in the videos you see the light skin, long hair, pretty girl that's all in the videos dancing. Now you got everyone thinking that's the type of girl you should have, when that's not the case. Like you don't know.
Or that's the type of girl that other women want to be like.
That
so
too.
They either they see their hair long and straight, or their hair may be a little more coarse. Now they want to make their hair long and straight. Right. So I agree.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll just add to the topic of entertainment. I think that when Black Panther finally came out, that it was such a and I mean I'm 39, so, and I wasn't in the comic books early on, so I didn't know that they were black comic book characters outside of Black Panther. It was new to me, but to see that cast in 2018, 19, that full-on black cast of majority dark skin, beautiful people, smart people, it gave a lot of people some like self-worth, because they had never seen that before. It was all, even if you go back, there've been so many African people represented as light skin, extra super light skin, or even white men have played African roles, and I think it played a big part. So.
Have any of you guys personally been affected by colorism? If so, how? Like, how has your life been affected by this?
I'll go first because I'm kind of talked. As you can see, I'm kind of in the middle of the color scale, so to speak. But my wife is much lighter. She's very light skinned. One of my sons is very light, and then one of my sons is kind of dark. So I can see how people treat and interact them from the outside. My wife has very curly hair, so people at her job don't quite know, when you look at women and they tell stories of how people want to come up and touch their hair and things like that, because it's like new and it's different. And then, you kind of compare that to what do you do that to? The only other things you really do that to are like animals, like, horse's hair and different things, like dog. Ooh. So that subconscious piece, how do they think of themselves? And my son's taller, darker skin. So, you had to say, well, unfortunately, people may categorize you like this or that. So with me, it's been more of like a teaching tool, not to let them go blindly into society and say, oh, I wonder why this person look at me this way or that way. Even when you're in the barbershop and it's all us, when they start, like you said, cracking jokes or whatever have you. But it definitely exists. It definitely, but we spoke earlier too about kind of being in the middle. If somebody's talking light skin or dark skin, then I'm like, okay, I'm kind of neither. So I shouldn't really say anything, So, but that's not right either. If somebody's saying something, especially derogatory towards one or the other, we're in the age of speak out, don't just be silent. So it becomes everybody's responsibility.
For me, growing up, it was either you're light skin or you're dark skin. Like I see myself as being brown in the middle, if you so speak. But growing up, you're either light skin or you're dark skin. So, or you're either hot yellow or you just black. Yeah. Unfortunately, of course, there's different shades of black. So, like, the even darker fellas, they probably got more jokes headed toward them than I did. But I was still and felt in that same category as the dark brother. Yeah.
AT, question for you. When you said they said either high yellow or dark skin, who was they? Was that black people doing that, or was it white people saying that?
Oh, but both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Both. We're really not on the topic of what white people are doing,
Right.
But it was also white people and black
All
people.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. How has my life been shaped by colorism? I would say yes. I'm one of the as you would say, high yellow. As some people growing up called me red. I have more of a red undertone of my light skinness. However, I was growing up, it was hard because I just consider myself black. My family was black, in my opinion. I grew up knowing why I'm black. However, a lot of black people didn't see me as black. They asked me questions, are you an Oreo? I had no idea what that meant when I was young. Are you mulatto? I had no idea what that meant. I would say no. Even if I was, I didn't know. I said, no, I'm black. What do you mix with? You have some Hispanic in you, don't you? No, at least I don't think so. So I started questioning myself, right? And so at such a young age, my life has been shaped by colorism. Even so much that, yes, I think it is something called light skin privilege. I think that is real, especially with your white counterparts. I think that they perceive you differently. You're more easily liked.
Yeah.
You're more easily accepted. And I definitely had that experience as well. Even through high school, going to a predominantly white school, I was more accepted than my darker skinned counterparts. Even into their homes, you're going over and you're not one of them, but you ain't far from it, And so yes, my life has been shaped. Even going to college, I told Brandon this story earlier. Like going to college as a light-skinned, curly-haired guy, not knowing anything about Greek life and MPHC, going in, my black friends, they said, "Oh yeah, you're gonna pledge Kappa." What does that mean? Didn't have a clue. Started to learn about Greeks and started to learn about fraternities. Kappas were stereotyped as pretty boys, light-skinned, curly-haired, pretty boy, smooth guys, right? So I was like, I guess that's me. You start thinking about it. They already stereotype you coming in. This is your own people. Right. However, I did not pledge Kappa. However, my point is that yes, you are shaped. You're stereotyped when people see you from the minute they see you. you're light skinned, you had an easier life. And I'm not saying I haven't had privileges from being light skinned, because I was just being light skinned has its things that you deal with. I remember growing up talking to my cousin who's actually lighter than me. My older cousin, she's lighter than me, and she said she had it so rough growing up because a lot of black people called her a white girl, and she was black. So just because you're light skinned, yes, you may have privileges. However, you can still have it just as hard as your darker skinned counterparts.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of people forget that.
Yeah.
And what you gonna say? Something?
Yeah, like you said, like with you being light skinned, you're going to get it from both sides.
Yeah.
Like the darker skinned black people, they're gonna get you because they think you're too light and man, you white, man, you white. Mm-hmm. And then the actual white people, they gonna say, you might be light skinned, but you still black.
Right.
So you're gonna get it from both ends.
Right.
Like you were saying, me growing up, I was kind of like in between. I got two best friends. One's darker than me, and one's lighter than me, significantly on both ends. And I remember me and my light-skinned best friend, we had got into like a huge argument, and I remember that, man, I don't like you light-skinned dudes, man, I can't stand y'all. And like we just got into it, like throwing blows and everything. I mean, it was bad, but we're still very close friends to this day. He's still my best friend, love him to death. But it was just so bad that, like, for one, that I had to say that. And because like growing up, it was like the light skinned dude, he got the best looking chicks. Most people, like, he was hated on a lot. The darker skinned dude, he was cool with most of the fellas. Everybody liked him because he wasn't light skinned and not getting quote unquote hated on. And but I mean, times have changed, man.
Yeah.
Like the brown skinned brothers, darker brothers, they
in
in now, man.
That's what my son says. Like I said, I have to go on their experiences. He's like, oh yeah, we cool now, like, you know. And I'm just like, oh word, you know, because I don't. Yeah, I know, and it's funny how it changes. It's almost like fashion, you know. It just kind of changes. But I was gonna say one thing. It's such a dynamic when you compare how we treat each other to how we were once treated. It's really hard to separate it, because we didn't, in this country, we know where we learned it from. So like we had a hatred for the light-skinned slaves because they were treated better than us. Like they didn't do anything to, you know, the darker, I say us, but the darker skinned slaves. They didn't do anything to each other, but that drew that line. And then like the Willie Lynch letter, it was used as a tool to cause the infighting and you know. So it's really sad to see it still exists. And I think conversations like this are going to be a great way to try to get past it, you know, in general. I know we're going to get to that point, but it's really hard to separate it. And I think the education is going to be the key to it.
Yeah. And lastly on this subject, I think a lot of people view light-skinned guys and women being very conceited.
Yeah.
I got that a lot. And you think your stuff don't stink. You think you too good. I'm like, no. I grew up a very humble guy. My parents, that's what I mean. When people say, oh yeah, you just a conceited light-skinned boy, I'm like, no, I'm not. But the stereotype of being light-skinned is that you think you're better than. I'm not saying some light-skinned people don't think that, because I don't know, but speaking for myself, I never thought that about myself or other people, that I was better than them because of my skin complexion. But that is a stereotype within the black community, that light-skinned people are conceited, or some light-skinned people are conceited. And that definitely shaped me when I was growing up because I try to do extra things for people not to feel that way. Go over and beyond so they know that I'm not conceited when I just wanted to be myself.
Right.
You know, so I thought that was very hard growing up, especially being young. I'm talking about like young, first, second, third grade, young, experiencing these things. And I constantly talk to my son about those things now because my son, that's light skin, brown skin, he's in that frame. And I ask him, I mean, do people talk to you about your skin complexion? And he like, nah, Dad, I'm black. Like, he's very quick to, I'm like, but I'm trying to slow him down and ask him questions about it. And he says he's fine. He doesn't get asked a lot of those questions, but he understands that, no, I am black. Because I want to teach him that you're not light-skinned black, you're not dark-skinned black, you're a black man. Because I think our people, we teach each other, oh, no, you're light-skinned. No, you're black. Right. Let's stay there. You're black.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and to piggyback, I have 2 kids of my own, and they're light skinned. Like my son, he's light skinned, got green eyes, and I worry about him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's my son. I love him to death. If he was dark skinned, I'd worry about him still. But just knowing society and like the stereotypes, like he's gonna have the darker kid that like tries to bully him and like try to beat him up and do all this stuff just because he's light skinned and got green eyes. Yep. Like when you see somebody like that, and like when I was growing up, you saw a kid light skinned eyes, you think he's soft, so you gonna try to punk him. And I had to tell my son that, like, 1, you need to protect yourself. 2, you are black. Like you're no other color. You're black, and it's okay to have light skinned friends, dark skinned friends, white friends. Doesn't matter. I mean, it's sad that we have to deal with that, and I have to have that talk with my 8-year-old son. But I mean, it's reality. It's the world we live in.
And I think that conversation and even these conversations is what more parents in our community need to have, though. Something that you mentioned real quick that has still shapes my life, and I think black and the colorism in the black community is that people view light skin as soft. And I heard that when you said that, and they definitely view like, oh, you light skin. You view a black person who's hard, and we talked about this earlier, as more bigger, maybe more dark skin, taller, bigger guy. They're the brawly guys. They're the bullies. So that colorism and stereotype goes on too, on a scale soft or being hard. And I do teach my son the same thing. I'm saying, son, no matter your color or your complexion or your tone, you protect yourself. This is who you are. These are your morals. This is what you stand for, because, I don't teach him to be soft at all. I actually teach him opposite of that. One reason, because that we already have that stereotype as being light skinned. So I teach him to, even on the basketball court, you go hard, you dive on the floor, because the light skinned boys, back in the day, they don't do that. They want to shoot. It's a different feel. So I teach him, no, you go for it. Because you go out, you have to prove, we're in so much of we have to prove our own people wrong, our own people difference. And we have to prove it to ourselves because it's indoctrinating us.
I got a story about being hard and soft, light skin and all that. So there was a young woman, and she was lighter than you, Rich, and she only dated she only dated super dark guys, and that's fine. But her reasoning for that was because she thought that light-skinned guys were soft. She thought that the darker-skinned guy was going to take care of her, even down to, she thought that, and I don't know if we can say this in church, she thought that the darker-skinned guy was a better lover in the bedroom than a light-skinned guy. I don't know where that came from. Maybe that was her experience, but it's amazing how we take our experiences and then we try to stereotype them and generalize them to other people. It's like, you had that experience with a couple guys, and but every dark-skinned guy is not a batterer. Every dark-skinned guy is not gonna can be just as soft as a light-skinned guy.
And like you said, every light-skinned guy ain't soft.
Right.
High school.
Come on, T.
The high school the high school I went to. He's a good friend of mine. Light skinned dude, got green eyes. You wouldn't messing with this brother. So it's poison case that every light skinned brother ain't soft. So don't run up.
Hope
on
y'all
somebody.
heard that out there.
I got another thing, and I gotta admit that when I was younger too, because if you remember Facebook, they had this thing where you put like your top 20 things about you. And so I had filled this thing out and I tagged everybody in it, all my friends, and I said, you know what, guys, I forgot what number it was, but I said, I'm gonna marry a light-skinned, pretty, long-haired girl from Chicago, AKA, I was very specific. And my wife,
You knew what you wanted.
my wife she's pretty, but she's not light-skinned. Her hair is getting long, but it wasn't always super long. I mean, but she's brown skinned and I love her to death. And you know, it was, and I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed that I put that out there for the universe and just for people to see that. And I'm ashamed of that.
But it goes back to, before you said that, Craig, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. That's what we saw. That's what is as high class. That's what portrayed as, that's what we want. That's what society portrayed as, so that's what we're gonna want. I mean, that's what a guy wants. I want a pretty, long hair, light skinned girl.
That's what's on TV.
That's what's on TV.
what's on
So that's
TV.
what you see.
Yeah.
You don't see your dark skin, pretty long hair, short hair, whatever it is. You don't see a lot of that. And so for you to want that, not to say it was wrong or right for you to say, but that's what you saw. That's what's glorified in our society.
I got two things, and I'm gonna piggyback on that one. Like, that's what you see, and that's what, like, these conversations, like these self-love sharing conversation is very, very new. I mean, it's 2021, but I think being at home, people started to try to do more for them and their families and understand. And it's a lot of psychological things that go with that. But you see, like Disney, I'm a big Disney Marvel guy. I got kids and everything. But you look at in the last few years how many leads have been black, how many, like I didn't realize this, but Soul, the movie Soul that just came out, was the first black lead male, I believe, I may be wrong, that Disney and Pixar, I think, put together and put out. And I sat there, I'm like, I had no idea. And they actually took one of the writers, and he had such a time trying to make sure the movie wasn't fake, like faked. Like it was a lot of white writers that wrote it. He was like, yeah, but like we don't really do things that way. Like he had to bring his blackness to it. But that gets onto another topic. But before I got off of that, I had a question for you guys, because I didn't go to college. When you went to college, got educated, everybody up here, I don't know if you've heard it before, but black people had a tendency, you know, back in the day, say, oh, well, you talk real good or you talk real proper. So for you guys, how did that play a part? Because all of you are educated and talk, you know, clearly, like, but I can always remember people always saying, well, why you talk like that? Like being black is supposed to make you talk bad or wrong or not correctly. So, you know, when you were in college and things like that, how did that play a role, or did somebody ever confront you with that question like that?
Yeah, well, when I was young, some of y'all know who my father is, he forced me to, I was reading the dictionary. I was doing book reports when I was young. So for me, it started way before even high school. And he tried to say, because you're black, you're going to have to do more. Right. It's just what it is, right? True. The society we live in. So let's prepare now. So he was preparing me for my future when I was that young. And even through college, yes, when getting out of college, people do look at, if you're educated black male, people do or can look at you, or you think you're better than because maybe you didn't graduate from college, or you speak a little more Ebonics than what I speak. Yes, I think we probably have all gotten there, but I definitely can say that I have. But I don't treat, even if I hear that from somebody, I don't treat any black person less than, because your struggle is not mine and my struggle is not yours. You know, so but yeah, I think that definitely plays a role today.
Yeah, we hear about a lot about code switching today, right? So we speak one way when we're at work, and then when we're at home, we're speaking another way, and that shouldn't be the case, right? We should be able to be ourselves, no matter where we are, and love the skin that we're in, right? But we don't feel comfortable doing that, right? I myself feel like I can't speak the way that I speak to you guys here, or my friends, or my homies, or whatever. I would never say homies at work, right? And there's a thing about whether that's professional or not, but it still comes down to being accepted, wanting to kind of fit in this box that we think that the mainstream culture has for us. And okay, I mean, I don't think it is. Will it change? I mean, I don't know.
And for me, I played basketball at VCU, and like after games, we would get interviewed, and while getting interviewed, I wanted to make sure I said the right thing. Wanted to make sure it was appropriate. Didn't want to say anything that could like jeopardize me or jeopardize the university. So, like you said, I wanted to speak proper. I had to get outside my comfort zone to speak to the reporters. I couldn't really just be myself. So,
It's a lot of pressure.
I mean, yeah, it is. Yeah.
And I think what you said too, Brandon, is so crucial. Our white counterparts, I feel I've been around it. They can speak freely. They can be themselves and know that they're not getting fired. Know that there's no repercussions. Know that there's no fines. Know it's, people not gonna think anything different than them. But if we let our hair down a little bit, we go into somebody's office. We having a conversation. We getting an email. Why did you do that?
You don't want to be the mad black guy.
You know, right?
Yeah,
I mean, so I definitely understand that.
Yeah.
And it's a sad thing, and it goes to even society now that we're still inferior. I mean, it's very evident.
And that's the thing when I was speaking on earlier about hiring the big black man. Like, you think about the person that's doing the hiring, it's like, man, one day I might have to fire this big black guy.
Right.
If I gotta fire this dude, I'm gonna need extra security or somebody in here with me. So like, I mean, they're probably like more intimidated by the big black guy, and that could probably cost them the initial job.
And I know in the past, I've been in customer service pretty much all my adult life. And when you go into certain places that may have receptionists or whatever, you would start to see a trend. Like most places you go in, the first person you see to be very attractive and very engaging, and if they weren't, it's not a black-white thing, but if it wasn't a young white female, it would be 9 times out of 10 a lighter skinned black female, and it's just to see that. And I saw it for 20 years walking into all types of, businesses and things like that. And I didn't see it so much when I went to VCU and things like that. I didn't do a lot of, or VSU. When I went to state, it was a little more relaxed. You didn't see it as much. But going to VCU and things like that, or, the more bubbly-ish, like I said, it's kind of like a stereotype, but you wouldn't see like a sister, as you would put it, that talk relaxed and things like that. It would be very much like a protocol, like emulating, because that's what they wanted. That's why they hired that particular person.
All right, guys. So we have all these problems that's still going on. What do you all think that we can do as a church, individually, as a group, collectively? what can we do to promote healing and to bring colorism to an end if that's possible? I know it's a big question.
I say my mom taught for like 30 something years. Like, I got mad respect for educators in general. They just don't get a lot of credit. And there are so many problems that have to be resolved with education and just talking it out. Had this conversation with my son the other day as he was picking classes, and there was an African American literature class, and he was like, "Well, I know enough about, I'm tired of reading about, black people and slavery and everything else." And I said, stop. I said, this is just about black authors and things like that. Like, turn that stereotype off that everything black doesn't have to be about slavery and history and negative. So it's like, if we educate, because you learn 12 years in school before you get out and go to college and then learn some other things, and then you're 20-something years old. So I think, like you said, having inclusion, school board, things like that, making things normal, African American studies, things like that, let it be a normal conversation. Because if people continue to think it's not a problem and it doesn't affect them, then they just kind of let it roll off their back. And that's one thing I think in the black society, a lot of things roll off our back, and then we give a lot of attention to things that really aren't that important, whether it be media and entertainment or whatever have you. It's got to be an important part because, sadly, like, we're grown men, but like kids, the like suicide rates and things like that, there's a lot of these kids having to deal with now. The rates are increasing in, African American kids. A lot of things like this play a part in that, whether a kid is picked on because he's light or because he's dark. And, like you said, like, the bigger you are, the blacker you are. We've seen it for the last few years in society, how they treat us, and then, you don't really see too many really, really, really light-skinned people get kind of ran up and treated that way. When you look at Eric Garner, you look at things like that, these big black guys, it's like a fear. Like, we gotta just diffuse it. Like, that man's a man just like me and you, or woman.
That's a good point. I mean, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about all the black men and women who have been brutalized by police, over the past few years. There's a lot of darker skinned people. Eric Gardner, Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown. I mean, all these
That's
guys.
that fear.
Yeah.
Like, like I said, it's hard to not say a white black thing, but that's a fear that they have, and not necessarily we have, but bigger, broad shoulders, broad noses, just things that you see along history. It's I want them to be in certain roles and do certain things, and unfortunately, that's really the only way it's gonna go anywhere. Is if, like, the kids, you got kids. My son, he's really like his mom. He's 5'6". So it's like, okay, when do you start having that conversation? Because we always used to having the conversation about safety. So now it's like, okay, well, when they cracking jokes and stuff, just either don't just sit by and let it happen. Say something, just, hey, man, that's not cool. We're all the same. You're all men, so that's where it is with me, More conversations like this, of course.
Yeah, and I think going to what you were saying, we were talking about earlier, you're talking about the bigger, dark-skinned guys. Even if you look, man, a lot of what people see, especially the white community, they look at television, they look at the movies, right? So look at your villains, look at your brawly guys, look at your people that's considered criminals in your movies, right? Whether they're black movies or other movies, they're darker, they're bigger, You rarely see a light-skinned brother with green eyes as a villain. I mean, you rarely see it, right? Right? Right. So
Maybe
I
Terrence
think,
Howard, but
yeah, Terrence, yeah, yeah.
And then we don't like him because of all the roles that he played. Like we don't know him personally, but we don't like man, I don't like that dude,
Terrence
you know?
Howard, he the exception. No, but I definitely agree. I think to answer your question, what can we do as a body of Christ? I think more conversations like this, more real conversations, more question and answer, and opening this up not only to the church but to the community. I think our community needs to be healed.
Right.
Our community needs to be educated about these things, to have forums in the school system about this. I think it starts as being a youth, and a youth knowing that, yes, I am black. Yes, I'm light-skinned, but still black. Yes, I'm dark-skinned, but I love my blackness. So I think it starts there in the education. Particularly in the church, what can the church do? I think here at FFC, we do a great job of this. A lot of churches, you may see your ushers as more of your dark-skinned, burly guys, However, here, Brandon's an usher, and you do a great job, Brandon. But my point is that we do a great job with inclusion. We include everyone, no matter your skin tone, no matter your race. And I think that's very important. Like he said, even bubbly people being at the door, as greeters. Greeters here, it doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your skin complexion. We love the Lord. And I think that's, as a church, getting to that root, getting to that foundation, getting to that base, that's what it's all about. Mm-hmm. And if you can teach that to your church and then have that spread into your community, I think that's what it's all about.
And I would like to add that, like you said, we have to educate ourselves, and we have to have more conversations like this with the community. And I think we have to do better. Like us black men, we have to do 100%. Better ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I have a story that like we were having some work done to our house and black businesses. So like if someone that's black, if we're getting a quote for, say, we need someone to come paint the house, mm-hmm. and they're black, and we have another person that comes that's probably white or Hispanic, like me and my wife, we're gonna go with the black person, just because we want to give back to the black community. We want to support the black community, and say like we hired a black man to come in there and do it. We expect him to like do a great job. Mm-hmm. Now say like he doesn't do a great job, then me and my wife, we're like, shoot, man, we could have hired the Mexican guy. We could have hired the white guy. The white guy would have did a good job. So like as black people, we have to we have to have some accountability for ourselves. So we got to do better as well.
Yeah, and I also think even with that too, because that's something that me and my wife and my family talk about. Even also having grace for our own people. Yeah. Like it's sometimes if a white person kind of mess up a little bit, oh, it's all good. Right. The first little mistake a black person make, we go scream, what in the world? I can't believe, da-da-da. That's why I don't hire no black folk. Mm-hmm. But a white person can do the same mess up. They are, yeah, but you did a great job.
That ain't happening in my house though. If a white person mess up, I'm getting on him too. But I understand.
I've seen that a lot in our community. We tend not to give as much grace to our own. And that goes back to the whole competition, that whole, I shouldn't have done with you, I should have done with them, white is better or lighter is better. It goes all the way back to that.
Well, that's like that 2020, that cancel culture, like we so quick, and I've seen it in action. If I always use these big box stores compared to small entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. So, Walmart can mess up, Target can mess up. Like you keep going back a lot of times. The gas station man, you might go back, but it's really easy to go into a black-owned restaurant or a black-owned clothing store, and you feel slighted in the least way, and you'll never go back, ever go back.
Or you just talk about them real bad to your people
online and the whole nine. I said, Dominion Power, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. Thankfully, you know, everybody got power. Hopefully by now, by the time you see this. But these big corporations, we let stuff slide when people in our own community that really need us will turn our back. And I say we as a community will easily turn our back and say, well, don't shop there, don't support there. When the reality is, it's hard to find really good products and really good people no matter where you look. No matter, you know, you look in the you know, major areas, it's, you know, I could spend my money over there and still not get treated the way I think I should. So when I walk into a black restaurant or whatever, if they mess up, they just messed up. They didn't just mess up just because they're black, right? Because we don't want the rest of society to look at us that way either. Right. So we can't look at ourselves in that same light.
I mean that's true, and I agree with you 100%. I'm still on the fence of, like, we gotta hold ourselves accountable. Like you said earlier, we as a black person, we gotta work twice as hard. Yeah. Like, mistakes are gonna happen. No one's perfect. We get all that, but like we just gotta be more accountable. Like we already know that we have to work twice as hard. So
that's good.
Yeah, as a psychologist, you know, my initial response is that we gotta get healed. You know, you all said this was, you know, we need to be healed from, this is generations and generations of stuff, right? So it's not gonna go away just like that. You know, you gotta go and get some intense therapy, and even if you don't think that colorism is your main issue, you know, it'll come up, I'm sure. You know, so just go get some therapy, you know, and I think we forget, you know, there are lots of other races that really appreciate us. They want to look like us. They modify their bodies to look like us. So we need to have the same kind of love for us that they have for us in our culture. Now, they don't always love us as people, but they love our culture. But they manipulate themselves to look like us sometimes, right?
It's,
you know,
like,
yeah.
I was going to say, sorry to cut you off, but that education part, knowing that we were from kings and queens and where we came from, and when you look at entertainment, people talk about Africa, and, you know, people, oh, it's just desert and dry, and, you know, I looked at a interview that Akon gave. He's like, there's so many beautiful cities there that nobody ever sees. So it's like a stereotype that you're taught, you know, even, you know, if you talk about colorism, I don't know if it goes to colorism, but, you know, African people and then African American people don't always have, like, the greatest relationships. Right. You know, we look each other different. They may think we're better or whatnot. And, you know, I think that just that education and knowing that you're something from just not slavery, because that's when they start teaching us when we're little, like, oh, black people just came from slavery. Yeah. It's like, so if that's where the groundwork starts from when you're 7, 8, 9, then you're not gonna really think of yourself as this great being, this, you know, person. And that's why we got to be included in those meetings, and when they type up the education, and like you said, you know, being a psychologist, like, I've said that black people, I can only speak as a black man, but I think that we carry a PTSD type things, and just seeing the treatment of others, like, and internalizing it. Definitely. You know, saying something happened to the darker skinned brother and internalizing that, you know, and not having anybody to talk to about it. Right. You know, you don't go to the barbershop and have conversations like this normally. It's mostly chill talks, you know, sports. But it has to happen more, you know.
Maybe we should go to the barbershop. Maybe we should do this in the barbershop. Like,
okay, yeah.
There's been interventions where medical doctors, they wanted to check men for their prostate and check their heart rates and all that.
Blood pressure.
They went to partner with the barbers.
Yeah.
And they got that stuff done.
Yeah.
So maybe
we got to see if we got a barber in the congregation. So barber, out there. We need to talk to you, get something set up.
Yeah, so no, you're right. They skip over the part where we were kings and queens and where people came from all over to learn from Africans and what Africans were doing, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Good point. I will thank you guys. This is a really good conversation. What we learned today is that colorism is still going on, right? It's not just a United States thing, it's a worldwide thing. And so what we learned is that we need to keep these conversations going. More people can get healed, more people can talk about this and put it out there. And we need to first challenge our own community to appreciate ourselves and at the same time, we need to simultaneously challenge our white counterparts to put us at the table, to put us in those positions. But we gotta start with ourselves first and heal from ourselves and treat each other right and unify ourselves, right? So thank you guys for joining us. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Faith and Family. Really appreciate you joining us. Have a good night. Okay.
That was dope. That was dope.
Yeah.
Hey, question.
Hello.
This is gonna be on Sunday as the service?